It's May 31st, 2018, and you're listening to the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable.
Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again. Remember, this is what we wanted. Remember, this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again.
Hello, and welcome to the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. I'm your host, Chris Quinn, coming to you once again from the Co-Prosperity Sphere here in Bridgeport, Chicago. Thanks, as always, to Lumpen Radio and its fearless leader, Logan Bay. Secondary shout-out to Logan Bay for saving the day the other week, a couple weeks ago. Much appreciated there. But I want to thank all of Lumpen Radio and all its leaders who have varying levels of fear in them. But I just want to thank everyone. I want to also thank you guys out there who are listening live on 105.5 FM Lumpen Radio. If you are listening live, you can hop on into the chat room. You're probably listening on a radio. If you're in the car, let's be real, the only place people ever listen to the radio anymore, or with a streaming app. You know, the Lumpen app is a good app. Steve, you've used the Lumpen app before, right?
So I am an Android user, and so the app does not work for me.
Okay. Well, anyway. Okay. Well, I wanted to thank the people who are using the app. If you're on Apple, it's a really good app. I enjoy it. It's just as complex as I need it to do. It has one button, which is the entire screen. When you tap it, the radio starts. That's all there is to it. And I like it. I use it quite a bit. But for those of you who are listening via podcast, which is probably the majority, I want to also thank you guys and mention that you should probably leave a review. I was told the other day to mention that more, so I will leave a review on iTunes or wherever. Stitcher is where people listen to shows. Other things, other places. Anyway, moving on. For those of you who are listening for the first time, what I like to do is tell you a little bit about the show by reading this statement for the 138th time.
Reading it right from the heart.
Yeah, from the heart. It is from the heart, but I will stammer and stutter if I don't read it.
Yeah, let's have 1 minute where we don't do that the whole time.
Okay, right, exactly. The goal of this show is to open up a window into how the people making, selling, marketing, and facilitating the beer getting into your glass feel about the topics that are a part of their everyday lives. Many of my greatest beer experiences have been talking about beer while sharing beers with people whose opinions I respect and admire, and it's these experiences that I try to capture with this show, the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. So I will now introduce my guests. But first, I want to mention that my guests' opinions are their own and not the opinions of any other business or entity that they may be affiliated with in any way. For example, let's say Lumpen Radio. Yeah, not Lumpen Radio's opinions. Wouldn't say that if I didn't have to, but I do. Also, not the Beer Temples or Beer Downloads or anybody else. Or anybody else. I don't want to name. I'm not going to name names. So let's go. So we introduce our guests in order of seniority, that being how many times they've been on. And Strong Mike, I think you have the lead now. I mean, it's a pretty senior roundtable this time, but I think Mike has.
I think I've been around less frequently lately, so he was always a little bit ahead, and I think he's pulling further away.
He's surged,
That's right.
Yeah. Oh,
I have longevity.
Hey-oh, surge. What's up, Mike? How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. How was your beer week, man? I didn't get to the pop up.
Oh, it was fun. It was really fun. I had some fun events with Mars and Middlebrow and 18th and Spiteful. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So it was all about collabos this time, huh?
Well, we did like during the week. We do a bunch of collaboration stuff to get people to come out and do some fun stuff on like a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday kind of vibe.
I wanted to go to the karaoke jam
Yeah,
that Ruben Kincaid was hosting.
That's right.
More for the it was a real estate seminar, right?
yeah. It was a real estate
I
seminar.
wanted to go more for that.
Held mostly in the bathroom. Apparently, is what he said.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So I missed out on the real estate seminar last time. I just was there for the karaoke, but it was
Sure. We all make
amazing.
mistakes.
And
The
Steve was
karaoke
there.
party was an awfully good time. in
So I got
2017.
it. Didn't go as late as last year. I don't think.
No, it didn't. Last year was nuts. Last
Right.
year we had people signing up at midnight. We were too stupid to know that was a bad idea.
Right. So I was asking you guys at like 11, hey, is it still going on? I want to get there now that the getting's good. If last year was any indication, you're like, no, it's over.
I mean, it went to solid like 12:30. So,
Oh, well,
but we weren't taking any more.
somebody didn't want me to come.
That wasn't me.
Yeah. You know what? You know who it was? It was Mike from White Rooster. Literally, I'm not even kidding. I've just now realized before the show that I've been texting the wrong Mike for a long time, and including him on several group texts with a guy named Mike from White Rooster Brewing in Sparta, Illinois. And he mentioned it to me once or twice that, like, hey, this is Mike from White Rooster. And I would say, whoops.
And just started
Literally
over.
early, I literally texted Mike from White Rooster today saying, hey, man, are you coming to the show tonight? And quickly caught it.
But you didn't text me.
Right. No, I did after, but then I came out and I saw that you were already here.
Oh.
So you should have a text from me, I hope. Or there's
Oh,
another Mike.
I got it. But
Okay,
it says
good.
it says they're coming still on for TONIGJTV ?
I mean, you figured out what that meant, I would assume. Anyway, thanks for coming. Anything else that you guys have done lately that's been exciting? Or that you yourself? Trips to China? I mean, anything
Yeah.
crazy?
Well,
I've
we
seen
did
you
do
since
that.
then.
Yeah, I was in Austin, Texas for 3 days.
Really?
Yeah,
What for?
the Honey Beer Summit. So it's like this thing of the Honey Board of the United States runs, trying to get more brewers to use honey, and it's like a technical seminars and like
Was it like a
teach you about
boondoggle
honey.
or it was like legit?
It was pretty legit, actually. Yeah, it was fun. They talked about mostly it was about how flavors derive honey, how honey gets made, and how you can use it in brewing. It was great. And then we went to an apiary, so I got to like hang out with bees, which is way less scary than I thought it was going to be.
Did you have to wear one of those suits?
Yeah,
Whoa.
we did. I was there with Lee from
Yeah,
Half Acre. Yeah.
Did you gram it? Because
I-
it didn't
I
happen
don't-
if you didn't.
I don't gram anymore. I have a gram, but I took it off my phone. It was just sucking too much time out of my life.
Probably smart.
Yeah. I still end up on it on the computer like once a day though. Just
You
checking
do it
out
on the
what-
computer?
I just want to see what Pipeworks is doing, but I don't
Right.
want like when I wake up, I don't want to spend 45 minutes going through Instagram and they'd be like, "Oh no, I'm late,"
Right.
which is inevitably what happens every day.
Yes.
So I have a honey-related question.
Shoot.
Why don't we,
I
can we
answer-
parlay this into
I can
your
answer
introduction?
any honey
Steve Mastney, Beer Download, Chicago Beer Society,
Honey-
many other things.
honey
Hello.
enthusiast.
Certified Cicerone,
Of
BJCP judge.
So there is a word for a honey wine, and there's a word which I think is a melomel, and there's a word for a cider honey hybrid, which I think is a sizer, or maybe that's
that was
a
No,
cherry.
mead. Mead is honey wine.
Well, mead is honey, right? But just straight honey. But I'm
Yeah.
talking like if you
You
have
blend
fruit,
these things together.
fruit and
Oh, I'm sorry.
so there's-
Sizer, I think, is mead and cherry. Isn't
Cherry, I think.
So there's these different terms of art for different fermented or different fermentables blended together from honey, and yet if you do it with beer, you just call it honey beer. Like there's not a word, and this has always struck me as
Well,
odd.
actually, there is a word. It depends on how much honey you're using.
Beer to miel.
So
meal.
no braggot. So if it's
Oh,
more
that's
than
right.
if it's grain
Okay,
and
there's
a
honey,
word.
it's braggot.
All
But
right.
it has to be more than 51% of the fermentable has to be honey. I didn't think I was going to be able to answer that question.
All right.
What's up, Honey Board? Best spokesman you've got.
Yes.
Well, my braggot question has been answered.
There you are. Steve, how are you, man?
I am doing well, and I was, you always ask what's going on and what's new, and I've traveled a little bit, but what occurred to me is that I've been making different brewery visits, slowly over the past several months. And there's one common fact here, which is Sonia, and I'm going to say her last name wrong, but Anacello. She was with Five Rabbit, and I don't know if she stopped working for them or not, but then she was over at Microphone, and then she's over at Spiteful, and I know that she's going to be working with the, it's killing me, Carl and Marilee, the
Rude Hippo?
Rude Hippo
Yeah.
folks.
Twisted Hippo.
Rude Hippo, like there's like a name change in there. And so we were going to, Arad and I, after a show, had some extra time, and we decided, you know what, I haven't been to the new Half Acre, I want to check it out. And so we went up there to go see it, and we're like on the wrong side of the building, and the door to Spiteful is right there, and we're like, so we went into Spiteful instead. So I still haven't been to the new Half Acre, but had a very nice time at Spiteful, and Sonia was very welcoming. So
Very nice. Cool. Next time you're there, you gotta give me a ring. It's
I guess that's true.
close to my neck of the woods there.
We will do it next time.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. Well, thanks for coming on. And we have glassware, but you're drinking out of a plastic cup. That's cool. That's fine.
I like these little plastic guys.
Yeah, you probably
These
brought them
classy
with you.
plastic.
Yeah.
I did not. I found them behind the bar, actually.
Oh,
I usually bring glassware, and I forgot today. I was so embarrassed I didn't want to ask, so I got my own little plastic
you
cups.
should be embarrassed. I'm glad. I'm glad that you know well enough to be embarrassed by not bringing your own glassware. I've had beer events at the bar where people have brought their own glassware.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
What type of glass was it?
What do you think?
Teku.
Nope.
Snifter.
Yeah, snifter. Brought their own snifter.
Specifically branded, or just they liked that style of snifter better?
It wasn't like branded to what we were tapping.
Was it a Phantom snifter?
I forget what it was. I
Those
just
are
know
rare,
he
man.
brought. Yeah, it's true. The funny thing is, I could make a gross of those, like whenever. Those are so easy to. All this glassware stuff,
And
you can
legally
just
you can't.
fake illegally.
Yeah.
Like these people are just buying and trading it off Craigslist anyway.
You'll need an invoice for that.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. No, not part of this. Would be Chris Quinn LLC. Chris Glass.
Yes, you want
crystal
you want-
clear.
You want
glassware.
You want your full name to be part of your scam LLC. That's
Exactly.
the best way to hide that. You really know about
Exactly.
shell corporations.
Makes it seem legit.
Plus, the day I get busted by
Dan Sheldon. Dan Sheldon's coming after you.
Danny
dude.
Printome from Fantome for bogus Fantome glassware.
Glassware fraud.
Yeah, I mean that's not gonna happen.
Well, you'd probably get busted because they were all the same. That'd be a little messed up and different. Every
yeah, they'd
time,
all
right?
be different and beautiful in their own way, and some of
Uniquely
them would
different.
make the beer taste gross, but still be amazing. But anyway, my final guest is a first-time guest.
Most interesting, without a doubt.
Yes.
Most interesting.
So the deal is, Carrie, first-time guests introduce themselves. So let everyone know who you are and what you do.
So my name is Carrie Quartercracks, and I work for Deschutes Brewery. And I've been in the beverage brewing industry
Beer game.
since 1997. While at college, I have to shout out to my alma mater, the Lafayette Brewing Company, which is really why I'm sitting here, because they instilled a lot of education, quality, made me fall in love with the beer industry. From there, I moved to New York City for a small moment and ended up deciding whether or not I was going to jump off of my balcony or move to Chicago. So I moved to Chicago, and I'm like, I'm going to go work.
You had
for
a balcony though,
I
so
did have a balcony. A
That's
fire
pretty
escape.
good.
Well, it was a fire escape.
Okay.
It was like a glorified balcony.
It was a glorified balcony. The fire escape.
And I ended up going to work. I'm like, I'm going to just move to Chicago, back near my family, and go work for Goose Island. So I ended up, after I ended up finally landing a job
At Goose, when was this?
at Goose Island in 2002.
I didn't know any of this.
So I ended up stopping at the Clybourne location and, asking if they were hiring. And they're like, we're not hiring, but our Wrigleyville location might be hiring. And I'm like, cool. So I'll just go over there. And I didn't know the city at all. And so I ended up walking to Wrigleyville
That's
and to apply for
good
this
3-4
job.
mile
3 or
hike.
4 miles.
And then I went there, and it was incredibly busy. I couldn't really understand why, because there was
Yeah.
a Cubs game, and like the worst time to apply for a job. But I walked in because I just walked how many miles, and I ended up submitting my resume, and then they were probably like, haha. But then so I was going to another interview at Sam's Wine and Spirits.
Yes.
And I'm like, I'll just go check on my application, and ended up checking at Goose Island, and they hired me on the spot.
Wait,
And
hold on. So you went back to Goose Clybourne.
This is a different
Goose
day.
Clybourne, different day.
I was going to say because
No, I
Sam's
didn't.
and
No,
Goose Clybourne
no,
are
no.
literally next door.
No.
So if you had
I'm not
walked
that big
then
of an idiot.
back, yeah. I'll just
No.
Yeah.
So
Where is
I-
this? Let me look it up.
So I ended up at another time, still unemployed, going and applying for another job, and that's when I ended up back at Clybourne, and they hired me on the spot, and I worked there for 4 years. And then I also ended up, after I left Goose, I went and managed a wonderful German beer bar and restaurant called Lachette's Inn. And
That's how you pronounce it, Lachette's. That's how you pronounce it.
Lachette's, whatever.
Okay,
It's been
good.
so many
Because I've had
years.
people
I
correct
mean,
me. I say Lachette's, but
It's Carl. I would say Carl Lachette.
okay.
Carl Lachette Jr.
More importantly to the people
Carl's
out there,
Jr.
it's a amazing
the best German
bar.
food in the city of Chicago.
Yeah.
And when I went there was like the same Fearless, whatever. We can get into that later. But when I left there, I managed there for 4 years. And when I left there, I went to work for West Lakeview Liquors for a spell because I wanted to get some retail experience.
Mike is familiar with that.
And,
Yeah.
Mike has also worked for
Cool.
Yeah, he's
Awesome.
one of the many.
Yeah.
So
Disgracefully
many people.
discharged.
And then,
Yeah.
from there, I ended up doing some tasting work for Paramount Merchants, which was a beer brokerage back in the day. Repped 14 different breweries and cideries, international, American craft, cideries from the U.S. and international. And then that's where I ended up meeting my boss at Deschutes because we did a class at 88 event, a
30
couple
years
events.
coming up for them.
Yeah, and so 30 years, woo woo. Independently, employee, family owned and operated, and I ended up. There was an opportunity at Deschutes, and I applied there, and the rest is history.
rest
to
is
this
history.
day. 4 years as of Saturday. So
All right. Well,
Happy
congrats.
anniversary.
That was the
Thank you.
most thorough intro, I think, in a while. Although that's not true.
Carl was pretty
Carl
thorough.
from Greatly literally had a 45-minute
Started
introduction.
the Cultural Revolution in China, I think.
Right,
So
exactly.
sorry.
It all started out with
guys know where China
the Red
is, right?
Spring. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Tectonic plate shift and great.
Right. Exactly.
So, Carrie, what
Well, thanks for coming
Excuse
on,
me.
Carrie.
yeah, thanks for having me.
do you represent Deschutes in Chicago, in Illinois, in the Midwest?
I represent Deschutes wherever my head lays. But generally, I get paid for working for Deschutes in Illinois. My territory tends to be the northern part of the state. But I also do work when we're opening new markets and wherever the needs be. If we need people at GABF, I go out to GABF. And I'll be back in Bend for our 30th birthday next month.
That's cool. How often do you get out there?
Usually, I would say 2 to 3 times a year. We do a lot of really awesome training and just gathering, sharing of ideas and minds. So I'll be there in less than a month.
Cool. I like asking that question because you get different answers, but I like when people are there.
Are back at Mecca.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's important.
It's super important.
Yeah.
It's just, sometimes I feel like we live on islands as sales reps, especially if we don't have a huge sales force or we're not local. And so it's always good to see the rest of the family and reconnect, and we inspire each other when we're together.
Cool. That's great. Well, that should be fun, that 30th. Guess you get crazy. All right. So I think we should I'm thinking about this crazy sour that Mike handed me, and I realized afterwards
the
it's
celery
a celery
beer.
sour. Yeah. But at
It's
first,
the greatest celery sour in the country right now, I think.
Yeah. Definitely top 2 or 3. So let's talk about beers that we've had lately that we've been digging, and take it from there. Steve, anything that you would like to start with?
I had the pleasure of visiting the Firestone Los Angeles Brew Pub. I forget what they call it. It's they've got their main place in the Central Coast, and this Los Angeles thing is an outpost. So it's like a little brew pub, and they do collaborations and stuff. But they have on tap their 100% union fermented, so raw oak barrel primary fermented DBA, and that beer is just really, really dang good.
We have it every once in a while. We get it.
I have had it at your store and enjoyed it, and there's nothing like having it out at their own facility.
I'm not trying to say there is. I'm just letting you know that I agree. I've had it and I agree, but not at Mecca as Carrie put it.
Right. So I was out there, and it was my brother-in-law's wedding, and my wife was like doing the daytime festivities, and I had the 3 kids who I managed to corral into the booth, and I had a few of the different beers, and it went better than I would have expected. And it's like I wanted to try all this different stuff. Adam Vavrick had been talking about, he had his special collaboration beer that they did out there, which I got to try, but I really just kept wanting to go back to the DBA. So,
did you tell anyone there, or I wonder if anyone would have cared, that you had been to the true Mecca and drank the true nectar of the Union? Probably not many people in the world have, but you've drank straight Burton Union juice at Marston's, not blended 100%.
That is true, and I mean it's funny because
think about, I brought the Dark Lord of remember the vial that they gave us?
I do actually,
and I was like, this is going to be so old, but I said, I guarantee you this is the rarest beer here.
you were right about
Yeah.
that. The Marston's, they use the pitch lined barrels, and the whole thing is the geometry of the yeast and this and that. And it was very cool. It was very fun. If you gave me 2 beers and you were like, you can only drink one of these for a whole session all night, I'd go with the oak fermented out in California. But if you were like, hey, you can only try one of these ever, well, then it'd be the Marston's.
Yeah. Well, cool. Anyone else Carrie, anything you've been drinking lately?
I don't know, just now.
What is that?
This
The celery sour.
God, that's so interesting and wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
I just like how it's so tart, and then all of a sudden that celery pops out. It's so good.
Yeah.
I love
And it's like a celery seed type thing.
Well, there's 10 gallons of celery juice that we broke Mariano's juicing machine. Kidding.
God.
And then there's 5 pounds of celery seed.
Wow.
That's great. Besides, obviously, I drink a lot of my own product these days, but outside of, Fresh Squeeze and Pack Wonderland and stuff, I have been revisiting some German European brands. Like Augustiner Edelstoff is my... when it warms up, you just want something super crisp, clean, and I love that beer so much. And so I've been hitting a couple bottles of those. I had some Hofbrau Dunkel recently that was tasting
so
pretty
good.
delicious. And it's a little higher in the ABV than what I'm used to drinking every day. So a couple of those and it'll set you right. And then, I had some Pipeworks today at an account. And Spiteful is, one
Everybody. So everything has been interesting and new to you. But that's the thing.
It's like everything is, because when you work constantly in one thing and you're drinking your thing and you're selling your thing, it's like when you have the opportunity, because sometimes I just drink Zinfandel. But yeah, so
I've had a few things. One was Spots, which is the sour tiki beer from Off Color. Man, really, like, so we've been here in Chicago, we've been having these like really weird weather patterns where it's like hot then cold, then hot then cold, but like pretty darn hot. And when it got hot, that Spots was pretty good. And we've been drinking, we always have lagers on as well. I find myself obviously drinking more of what's on draft. And, we cycle through lagers and we put Stiegl Pils on. I actually stopped and talked to Steven, the beer buyer, and was like, we have to remember this. Like this. So like there's a lot of good ones out there, but don't forget that if we want to have the best stuff on, like, we know what some of the best stuff is, and Stiegl Pils is so good. We had a bunch of different Pilsners on, and they were good. They were good. But it wasn't, in my opinion, even in the same ballpark as the Stiegl. And which makes sense. I mean, you have, breweries who have been making them, lagers for maybe a couple years, versus a lager-only brewery, essentially, who's been making them for a century or more, and it shows. I would imagine that these American breweries in 100 years will be making lagers just as well. But
the 8 of them that are still around.
Exactly. Like the 100-year-old lager breweries now, like. Perfect example. Their lagers are just
they've really been pursuing.
Okay, maybe I take it all back. But anyway, the Stiegl Pils was great. It's widely available and it's darn tasty.
How was the tetrahydropyridine levels in the Spots? Because that was one that a couple years ago I was using as like a reference for like there is just a ton of it here.
Which is the Cheerio stuff,
right? But only after you swallow,
right? It was really nice and clean.
All right,
yeah. But there was a beer that I had the other day that had quite a bit of that in there, and I thought of you. We were all trying to think of. It was a sour beer at. What was it? I forget. It was at the Green Lady's birthday event, and I had one, and I said, I wish. I was talking with the owner of Afterthought Brewing, and we were trying to remember what the name of that compound was. But,
THP. I always think of our friend the Crusherone because he's not convinced. That's right.
MC Crush. He actually he called me before the show and said, "Only refer to me as MC Crush for the rest of your life."
I thought Crusherone was pretty good, though.
Yeah.
I mean,
Master Crusherone.
The Master Crusherone.
That's his title, but his name is MC Crush.
Right, of course.
But
Master Crusherone is what
Crush.
the MC stands for.
Yeah.
It's still not clear to me if I've been convincing enough to him that this is like a thing that you can perceive because he says, "Hey, there's no laboratory standard, therefore how do you calibrate?" And it's like, yeah, but look,
yeah, it's there though. Yeah, I mean, we've all had beers with that in it. I had one recently as well.
Yeah. And sometimes it can – you're very sensitive to it, Steve, but it can be pretty dominant. I know Penrose beers, when they first came out, was very heavy in it too.
Correct.
It's just like I call it Cheerios. That's not exactly accurate. It's some sort of grainy, sweet grain thing that I get.
Kind of like a mealy kind of mouthfeel. Instead of finishing crisp and clean, it finishes like, what's this weird residual sweet thing that's happening in my mouth?
Yeah. Honey Nut Cheerios might be better than Cheerios. Yeah. Something. Anyway.
Grainy.
Yeah. Okay, there you go, grainy.
They call it mousy in the wine industry, and I've not been able to totally connect why.
Yeah, I don't get that part either.
Yeah.
That's probably why we call something like horse blanket. Like, does anyone know what a horse blanket smells like anymore? Maybe mice tasted like that. Back in France. Maybe French mice taste like that.
Right. Mike?
I just got back from Austin, Texas last week, so I had a bunch of stuff down there. So obviously Jester King, fantastic beers. Brought back some Noble King and some Spawn, and then drinking those. it's one of those breweries where you forget how good it actually is. People talk about it often, and then you're like, oh, this place lives up to all of the hype that people.
That's cool.
Both in beers and in setting. Like I was down there.
I've heard, yeah.
We went out. They have goats. Got to meet the goats.
I was gonna joke and ask if you got to hang out with goats.
We did actually. I can show you some pictures later. Got to meet their farmer, Pepe.
Unless it's on the gram, I'm not gonna.
Yeah, well, then you're not going to see it.
Yeah.
I met their farmer, Pepe, who told me
Yeah.
a story about how he healed a goat with peyote, which was an interesting experience I've never had at a brewery before.
I've heard that guy is an interesting guy.
He's the real deal. He's he sleeps in the goat barn.
That's what I've heard.
Yep.
MC Crush has told me about him.
He's a cool guy. What else? I have? Austin Beer Garden Brewery is down there, and they make some fantastic
Austin Beer Garden,
Brewery. I think is
Brewery.
what I'm pretty sure is what yeah.
or is it Austin Brew Works?
No, it's Austin Beer Garden something brewery or beer works, but they
Wow.
make some of the best lagers I've ever had.
Oh, they're the ones that have the big A on the cans. They do cans.
I was at the brewery,
Huh?
so
Oh, that's Brewworks. Oh, Beerworks. Okay.
I don't know what their logos look like. They have something called Industry and something called they did some really fantastic lagers. There's some guys who started Live Oak with Chip. And
Industry.
that's what the name of the beer is, but
I know.
I drank it down there. I was
Industry.
like, this is really, really good. And like they're doing a great job. And then Paste came out with their like top 138, and they were number one for
Oh,
best
really?
American lagers. Yeah.
Wow.
So I was like, yeah, that was really good. and everything they made was like very crushable, very good for the hot Austin weather, and incredibly well made. So a lot of really good lagers being made down there. The Live Oak legacy,
I need to ask the gentleman Roger Deschner, who wrote the alt BJCP guideline, was down in Frederick, which is I guess west of there a little ways, at a place called Altstadt, and said it was the best American alt beer he'd ever had. And I was curious if that was making its way to Austin.
I didn't have any. It might be, but I didn't have any. There's an incredible German heritage down there.
Yeah,
so
there
like,
is. Big time.
For a place that's so hot, it's so interesting they were able to get lagering so right, which is had to have come after refrigeration. So
Well,
it couldn't be that old of a brewery
No,
down
the
there,
ice
so-
houses. It was the ice houses
And
that
the
brought
caves,
that
baby.
stuff
Oh.
down.
Yeah,
And a lot of it was because of the trains and the beer.
Yeah.
They would have these ice houses. They have to pick up the ice and stuff like that. So they have these like depots.
Yeah.
So I believe that's where a lot of it started. And I also think, I don't know the style. So the Germans would come down there. They'd play their music. They're kind of like oompa music. And if you
like
notice,
Bohemian music and Mexican music, and if you drive down the street in Berwyn, you don't know which is which.
well, right, but that's exactly why. That's where that music
Same.
comes from. It comes from the German influence
That makes a lot
down
of
in
sense.
Texas.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
Mexico,
Yeah.
they taught them how to make lager.
Right, exactly. But
So when you go get a
that's why
burrito,
it
that's why
sounds
there's
like
oompa
that.
music.
Yep.
It was super cool to me to go down there and see these tiny, that was a pretty small brewery, and they made space for horizontal tanks to actually be doing the lagering right, and then go to Live Oak, which has like these massive, everything's horizontal there. They don't do any primary fermentation in conicals. So
Well, they
it's
do
all-
basically Heffen pills. So.
They do, yeah. It's basically all like they do a pale ale as well, but
They're anti-hydrostatic pressure.
yeah, and it you know what, it makes a difference. It's incredible.
Like
It's all they've
Yvonne.
ever done
Yeah.
too. Which in this day and age, you'd be like, what do you mean? You got to turn those tanks over, and they take up so much more floor space. So you got to put a. It's like we also went to another brewery that had really skinny, tall tanks. They were making all kettle soured beer, so it's all a bunch of stuff, different stuff's happening
Yeah.
down there.
Steve and I were
Very
in,
diverse brewing scene, which is super cool.
Okay. Steve and I were in had Edmore sighting.
Weird.
We're in Belgium, and we are at De La Seine, and the owner and head brewer there, Yvonne, took us into his fermentation room.
He's a strongly opinionated guy.
Oh,
but
just
but
in
well
general.
supported opinion.
Well
Yeah, yeah.
supported. Very
and the beer,
very
the beer
smart
proves
guy.
it that whatever he's doing is
But
working.
he was very much about the geometry of the fermenters, and he didn't have horizontals, but he didn't have
Essentially.
He had very, very wide.
very wide cylindrical.
So
conical.
nothing was
spaceships,
tall,
like
you know?
like UFO flying saucer looking kind of
Yeah.
upside down. 'Cause they do have cones and stuff.
Yeah, they do. They have cones on the. They were still cylindrical conical, but
Yeah.
they were wider than they were tall.
like a hockey puck.
Yeah,
yeah,
with a cone on the bottom. The cone wasn't really doing. It's just for collecting
yeah.
and stuff.
But the language he used was so he was like, "Oh, it's such a catastrophe,
A travesty.
It's such a travesty that I see these tanks, this tank geometry."
Well, he
It's so
very much
funny.
is about like the job of the brewer is to tend to the yeast and to make the yeast happy. So he has like it's not like to crank out IPAs. His thing is like I want to make the yeast happy, and that's what makes my brewery work. So it makes
Right.
sense when you come from his very not extreme but very ardent perspective.
And he also strongly feels that 90 out of $100 in the brewery should go in the packaging. It's like packaging. He
Yeah.
really rams that home.
Yep.
Well, I mean, he sends his beer halfway across the world, you know. So, and he makes delicate beers.
Yeah, he does.
So it should be in shipping and not packaging.
Yeah, there you go, air freight. I think it's about time we take a station break. You guys who are listening live can hear some of the great stuff that Lumpen Radio has to offer, some of the awesome shows. I don't know, maybe there'll be a Boogie Monsters promo. I don't think they have one, but hopefully there was. If there is one, I'll keep it in. But either way, I will. We'll be back very soon with the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. Welcome back to the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. I am your host, Chris Quinn, and I am joined by Mike Strong, Carrie. You got to help me with
Quarter
that.
cracks like Cracker Jacks.
Okay, Quarter Cracks,
That cracker.
and Stephen Mastney.
Hello.
How are you? Very nice bass you had baritone you had going there. So let's get right into it. Let's get into the meat of the show. So there was
Get right into it 40 minutes in.
yeah, exactly. Let's get right into it. Right into it off the break. Just don't be.
Now we're getting right into it for sure.
Yeah, right? Come on. See, now you see why I need to have stuff written
So Sean
out.
Hill has
Quickly.
opinions. Of,
Right. So there was an article in the Morning Advisor, which is a paper or a news site in England, about Sean Hill, or it was an interview with Sean Hill of Hill Farmstead Brewing, and the article focused on, I guess the headline was beer industry not discussing mental health and alcohol link, and it was basically Sean Hill talking about a whole bunch of stuff that I thought was all really interesting. I thought it was very meaty stuff.
He's picking up logs that don't usually get picked up, and you're looking at all the little crawly things underneath them.
yeah.
Yeah. And the stuff he talked about was the lifestyle of the industry, but really the supply side, I think, is what he was supply and maybe middleman. Well, maybe all of
It was
them,
probably
really.
the whole deal.
But I was
Right
thinking
up
about
to
like the
including the beer
reps. I was
nerds.
thinking like hashtag rep life and stuff like that. And but then he was also talking about hype and Instagram culture and a whole bunch of stuff that, you know, if certain people say it, it's just whining. But when somebody like Sean Hill says it, I think people take it a little bit more seriously. So I was glad to see a lot of this stuff. I pretty much agreed with 100% of it. But those of you out there probably haven't read it. You should probably go and read it. It's themorningadvisor.co.uk. But the first part that he talked about was about, I think, the industry lifestyle and the stresses and the strains that it can put on you. And I think he said, I don't know anyone in the beer world who isn't struggling with it. And he said, look at at every photo from festivals like McKellar Beer Celebration. People are just drinking 10 glasses of beer every day and living this wild traveling lifestyle. It really isn't healthy.
I think that looking at McKellar Beer Celebration as what the average brewer is doing is a little bit skewed into his world. I don't think
Yes.
most brewers aren't
It's
gallivanting
definitely,
around the world doing that type of stuff.
The quote-unquote cool kids are doing that
Sure.
more. But what I was thinking of,
Yeah,
that's why
nobody's been
I
going
thought
to
of
China lately.
I thought of
or
right,
Japan
exactly.
or Texas. Yeah, no, I'm not saying I don't do it. I'm saying you.
He's not saying he's not cool. He's saying most people
aren't as cool.
Aren't
as me.
cool.
It's pretty obvious.
No, but I took that as like reps. Honestly, I took it as like brewing reps, distributor reps, the people who are doing that lifestyle, maybe with less miles in between the trips, but like a distributor rep, for example, they have so many accounts, so many brands who might have so many events going. They are, supposed to be at a certain number of these events, and
Right.
they're out. It's just part of the lifestyle.
Sure.
For certain positions, I mean, Carrie, you would know so
Just,
much better
like,
than me.
What do you want? I mean, I can just go. Wow.
Yeah.
So, which part of it? Like, as a rep in the industry, I've seen a lot, just and experienced a lot. It is taxing on your time and your health. We talk about work-life balance in this industry a lot. It's very important. At one point, I texted my boss and I said, that is a unicorn. It's just not realistic because, I mean, if you're just invested in your brand and your job, like you want to go above and beyond for every customer that you have. But I definitely, after reading the article, I think it's a very important topic, not just as a supplier, but I've seen really amazing people be broken down by being part of it. And there's people in the industry that are wonderful and lovely people that maybe shouldn't work in it. And I do think that we need to spend more time talking about it and supporting one another, because at the end of the day, the reason that I got involved in craft brewing is because of all of the community and family aspects, and we need to take care of our own, in my opinion.
And that's something that I think the big guys are killing the little guys at, is the responsible drinking effort. You don't see it talked about really at all. I mean, there is definitely an element of having fun and partying and alcohol being a part of that. But at the same time, and this is, again, just me personally, I don't, when I'm doing things that are certainly public facing, I'm not doing shotgunning beers. I'm not doing chugging contests. I'm not doing stuff like that because I personally don't think that that's the side of craft beer that I want to show, or the side of beer that I want to show. There's so much of that out there. That's fine. And I've funneled beers before. Like I'm not saying that I'm afraid of it, but I do think that I don't know. I guess it's hard for me to put into words, but there's something that that kind of makes me retract when I see that stuff a little bit. And it might be because, I mean, my father's an alcoholic, so I am maybe more sensitive to that. Now, he hasn't drank in 15 years, but it is something that is in my mind that this is a addictive substance that we're dealing with, and you have to kind of treat it with respect.
Well, and the, so yes, like, shotgunning beers or beer bong or whatever is one way to consume a lot of alcohol quickly. But also,
Butt chug.
If you, right.
Just listening. I thought we were listening. Never mind.
You follow some weird Instagrams.
if you go to a festival or bar or whatever, and you're just, if you're just sampling as the event is kind of intended for, or if you're just like, I want to try this, I want to try this, I want to try this, it's pretty easy to go over the line from, I tried these few things to, I tried all these things and now I'm pretty intoxicated. And then,
and you put it a very good way, like as the event is intended for. I mean, that's what you're supposed to go through and sample beers. Now, it's not possible to do them all, but yeah.
And so, like, there's a saying that that is good to bear in mind but hard to live up to, which is everything in moderation, including moderation. So it's okay to go overboard occasionally.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you're going overboard almost all the time, then I mean, it catches up to you, like, in terms of physical health, like you get larger and you don't feel as good. And then on the flip side of that, there's the mental health aspect that Sean Hill was talking about he was going through this super stressful time expanding his brewery for 3 years. So he would be like, work. And then he would be like, ugh. And to decompress, he would drink 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 beers, which is...
Well, you're saying the number. He would say more than normal, I think is what he
okay.
said. I don't,
Right.
just because he was sensitive to
Right.
how this was reported. Yeah.
And so, drink enough beer to, kind of take the edge off and then some, which again is not necessarily an inherent problem to do occasionally. But if you do it every single day, then it's like you wake up and you're like, oh, and then you drink as much coffee as you can to like get back into the rush, and then you do it again. And that's the exact scenario that he laid out. And it's a thing that's relatively easy to fall into if you want to. And some people can handle that lifestyle for a decade plus, and other people might kill themselves in a car crash, and it's, we drink alcohol because it tastes good, or we drink beer because it tastes good, but we also drink it because it has alcohol and it makes us feel good. It's like life is hard sometimes, and this makes it less so. And that's a very implicit in the whole thing, and it's so easy to just take it a little bit further than you should, or a lot further than you should, and backing off and taking like a self check occasionally seems helpful.
Yeah,
Go
ahead.
You first.
Well, I was just saying, the scariest part that I don't even think this article really gets into is the banality of how easy it is for that to happen to people. Like, and it's like that adage, like the frog you put a frog in a cold pot of water, and then you start heating it up slowly, and it doesn't realize it's getting boiled. And so you watch people who, when they were 22 are just having a good time, and by the time they're 24, they're maybe drinking a little too much. When you're 28, it's like, or maybe these timelines, depending on the person, extend. But as all of a sudden, you're like talking to someone, they're like, oh, I didn't even drink yesterday. And then they're like, oh, wait, no, you had 7 drinks. Like, that's not drinking to you. And
Right.
so they're, in the adult world, and they only have one coping mechanism now. And it's tragic to watch these people who were incredibly bright and incredibly capable, and then in a blink of your eye, you didn't realize, you didn't even see it happening, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, you do this, you still do this every day, and that's the really the sad part is you see it happens, and no one talks to each other, and barely anyone talks to that person about it when they
That's
realize
the
that.
thing that
It's
really
like,
gets me.
It's like when is the point, and when is the point where it's a problem?
Yeah.
And so in an industry where that's kind of accepted. Like, oh, they should still show up on time. They do their jobs. Like, yeah, but he threw up on the brew deck. That's not acceptable. I'm not saying this has ever happened at Pipeworks, but these are stories you hear from people.
Right.
Well, that's not an acceptable behavior anywhere else in the world. And it's just like, oh yeah, but he gets his job done. It's like, let's call it this. Industry also fetishizes extreme hours and extreme work in a way that I think is more normal in America now than it was before, but has pretty much always been the case. You never hear, every time you talk to anyone, they're like, I'm the busiest person in the world, and I'm drinking a bunch. So it's like, none of that's healthy. Sometimes it's necessary, the work part is necessary to make your brewery operate, but the drinking part is just comes part and parcel with it. And you're like, I earned this. Well, you didn't. It's really sad and terrifying to watch, and it happens slowly over a course of years, and then all of a sudden you look around, you're like, oh wow, some people stayed there.
And for me, it's because I've seen it as well, and I've seen it with friends of mine, and I empathize with them because it's, what do? This is your career. You have success at it. Your career is the beer industry. You can't go cold turkey for example, I don't want to keep bringing up my father. I don't know how much you would appreciate that, but whatever. He just doesn't drink. He hasn't drank, and but if he was in the beer industry, he probably wouldn't have that option. He'd have to kind of drink a little bit, and that's so much more difficult to control. It's easier to just say, nope, don't do it anymore. Not that that's easy. Not that that's easy at all. But that's kind of my point.
Well, and you do occasionally meet the sober bartender who say, hey, what about this and what about that? And I mean, they are genuinely doing a worse job bartending because they can't tell you about the product they're selling.
Sure.
And that's fine. I'm not that's not
I
a
don't
judgment on
necessarily
them.
agree
but
with that.
Bartender, what about a brewer or a sales rep?
We had a coworker of mine when I was at Goose Island, and she did not drink, and she was a great worker there, and she could understand information and convey that to the customer. I mean, I think
you
some
can go.
level,
You can go to other positions. I think that might be an example, an easy example for people to relate to out there. But if you're a brewer,
what if you're a buyer? Because
what if you're a buyer?
Being a
Exactly.
supplier, I've had an opportunity to work with some really great people, and there's some really great people that have said, I'm taking some time off, and they recognize within themselves, or they've had a moment that changed their course, and they saw the need to take a different path and maybe take a break. And some people, I know a lot of people will take a month off in January or February, so on and so forth. But I think the bigger issue is there's two things. One is I've seen some really amazing people crumble, and these are people that are idolized in our industry, and no one has the balls to say, hey, I love you and I care about you, and I want to support you.
Yep.
And this doesn't mean you're a bad person. This means that you have a disease or a sickness that, and maybe it's someone that's just had a bad time. I've had bad times in my life that I'm not representing myself the way that I need to be. And I've, used alcohol to get through those times, and they weren't the best of times. But, we need to make sure that we're caring for one another and being honest with one another. And then there's also, I want to make sure that we speak about the repercussions of that, because when you're having someone that is overindulging or having a problem, there's other things that are like a chain reaction, and their behavior can lead to things that are very detrimental to our industry, as far as, misbehaving in public, embarrassing themselves in accounts, being inappropriate sexually with their coworkers, employees, etc., strangers. There's a lot of things that go into this problem. It's mental health, but it's also just what happens in this environment. We are in a very unique environment. That most people don't have to, when they're going to the break room to sharpen their pencil, they're not looking to get their behind grabbed or
beer.
anything like that.
Oh, right, yeah.
Right, I work in the bridge industry, and everyone is frequently joking about wouldn't it be great if we could just get a 6-pack out? And it would, but we've got extremely clear boundaries that are set that are no, you absolutely do not do this, and that's actually one thing that's probably my overall risk averseness has prevented me from diving whole hog into the beer industry as a day job. But a big part of it has been that I look at myself and I see that I will sometimes drink too much, and it causes various problems for me. And I have an easier time stepping back when I have an experience like that, because I'm doing this as a amateur plus or something like that. And if I was, if this was my bread and butter, it would be much harder for me to either take a step away from everything and then feel like I wasn't as connected as I should be, or just think, well, I just have to do this,
Like a
and
firewall there almost, yeah.
then
Or a safety net or something.
I talk to a lot of my friends who work in like advertising or in like one of my friends who works in a post-production house, and they have much more.
Man, those guys are stressed.
Well, they have
too.
much more lax rules about drinking than we do. Like we have, and ours are out of necessity because
Yep.
we've had problems. But like there are basically no rules, and they have kegerators. Like they have
and
they have
for
free
years.
wine Wednesday or whatever,
Yep.
and like
Yep.
and
Chris has a
I
number of
don't-
accounts that
right. And I don't know what the
Yeah.
the difference between the
I
people
know
in those industries
there's a place
and
Cutters, which is a big post-production house
Yeah.
that has for a long time, and it is. Now I have a friend who worked there, and I don't want to. All right, so I also deliver to a lot of other places. I don't want to throw anyone under the bus here, and I got to be very careful now based on what I just said. But I do know that industry in general is incredibly high stress, and I do know that overall, not even specifically them at all, a lot of these high stress industries also that fetishize long hours, like
Yeah.
you were saying, Mike. I've noticed that goes hand in hand with ones who want to have kegerators there, and
right. It's essentially to keep the employees there,
and that's exactly what my friend said. I walked in there. I was not in the beer industry, and there was all the food you could want. It was all like portioned out. It was basically catered. Everything you
tricky.
wanted, every meal, any sodas, any beers. It was like you walked into a 7-Eleven. They had these racks just set up of anything you wanted. And they had pool tables. They had everything. And I was like, this place is amazing to work for. And he just said, Chris, all the glitters is not gold. And
Right.
he
And-
said they don't want you to leave.
they sometimes they have to work hours that go super late into the evening because they're working on projects for people who multi-billion-dollar companies who
In
needed
Hong
it done,
Kong,
needed
they
it done
by-
yesterday.
yeah,
and,
right.
But I think there isn't like the culture there where it's like if someone were to crack a beer at 8 a.m., like immediately someone would be like, that's not okay. But not every brewery is like, oh, if you're going to drink a beer at 8 a.m., no one's going to come up and talk to you most of the time. I think, oh, you handle it, and if it becomes a habit. But then it becomes a habit for some people, and it like slipped into it, and
Yeah.
like
I think-
you
I think-
joke about it until it's not, and then it's not
Right.
funny anymore, and then you should really
That's
go
the
and
other
stop
thing.
it, but what you do is just stop joking about it.
It also,
That's
it
sad.
like becomes almost encouraged as well. I have to mention, you're listening to WLPN LP Chicago 105.5 FM Lumpen Radio. This is the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. I am Chris Quinn, and my guests are Steve Mastny, Carrie Corticrax. No.
Yeah.
Yes, and Mike Strong. And I don't quite remember what I was going to say. Oh, no, I have also noticed that it's not only not talked about, which I think is cowardly, and I have felt like a coward, Carrie, for not mentioning it to people that I think have thought like on multiple occasions, like that's not okay, that's not okay. Someone needs to say something. I should be the someone, and I don't, and it's for whatever reason. And the other thing is, it's also at the same time, one of the reasons I don't do it is it's because it's being cheered on and almost like a badge of honor and something
Say
that
more
people
about
like.
that. What do you mean cheered on?
I say that people say, "Oh man, that person's an animal. Oh, they're a beast. They do this and they do that," and it's something that people put in a positive light often, or like, "Oh, there they go again." Like one of those type things where they're doing this again.
Yeah.
And it's like but in like a jovial way, like, oh man, they're at it
now
again.
it's a party. Like
Now
that
it's a
guy's doing-
party.
That guy's shotgunning again.
Yep. So, and I don't feel comfortable with it, but I also doubt I've never been accused of not worrying enough, I guess. So,
So
I think about that as well.
I think, some of the things that bother me are like when we're out as a community at an event, and then you clearly see someone you love and they've had too much to drink, and it's like nobody wants to deal with it.
Right.
They're just on, and there's been a number of times where I've put people in my cars. Generally that's just the way to go, because if they've had too much to drink, I'm not going to Uber them. There are times when I can Uber people that, are able to make that stretch. But I think, I find myself doing, the driving home and things of that nature when people who I feel like are much closer to the individual are just like passing it by. And that is a big problem.
Yeah.
So I think that, we're just, with me, I just am trying to find middle way. Like, I'm very zen these days. And it's like, I've had my ebbs and flows of overindulging and things. So it's just, our company wants us to have a good time. They're very supportive of taking Uber, get a hotel, yada, yada. But really what I think that we need to be focusing on is just taking care of one another. And it's an uncomfortable conversation, but I think it boils down to communication and be like, hey, I really love you. I'm going to say something. I don't want to offend you, but, can we talk about this? Because, I know you're not this, and this is what I've been seeing. So like, just wanted to mention it. It doesn't have to be a big ordeal, but we do need to have more of the conversation.
Right. Well, and in the moment, alcohol makes at least
Don't
some
have
people,
the conversation in the moment.
Right.
It
It makes some people belligerent. It makes other people happy. It makes some people both. But, as a person who has overindulged many times in my life, sometimes on purpose, sometimes on accident, be comfortable with the fact that you're like, oh, like I have gone further than I should have. I'm going to sleep on the floor of the co-prosperity sphere and own that. That's okay. Like, that's much better than going and killing yourself or someone else in your car. Or, it's like, you got to find a tree and some mosquitoes eat you. Like, oh, well, and I know that I look at life a little bit differently than maybe some other people.
It's a good way to
Thank
look
you.
at it, man.
But,
And you live it. You live it because all those things are factual things that you have done,
Right.
that I have witnessed. I saw you getting absolutely devoured, a cloud of mosquitoes over your sleeping face outside when Ed and I and some other people were scouring Bridgeport looking for you. You had gone to sleep under a tree, and there was just a swarm of
responsibility
mosquitoes.
takes all forms, Chris. And I will credit the Boy Scouts. I took a wilderness survival merit badge, and the one thing I learned is never, ever create a camp under a pine bough and then put like a tarp over it, because it creates this perfect storm of nothing but mosquitoes, and you look like you have the mumps in the morning. But I'll tell you, after that, mosquito bites never bothered me the same way again.
There you are.
Mosquito vaccine.
I think we should maybe listen to some tunes for a little bit, take a break,
Yeah,
and
it's heavy.
we'll come back and we'll talk about some other stuff. Get back with more of Welcome back to the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable. Excellent transition, producer.
He's
Serge.
crushing it today.
Oh my gosh. Maybe he's going to
Producer Crush
MC
Around.
Crush, DJ Crush.
Yeah, DJ Crush.
DJ Crush. I'm your host. I am not MC or DJ Crush. I am Chris Quinn, and I am joined by my guests, Steve Mastny, Carrie
Cracks.
Cracks. Sorry. Very bad with names.
Pretty close.
And
I've only
Mike.
known you for like 10 years.
Michael Strong. Yeah, but I have an easy name to
Whatever.
to
I have a real
pronounce.
name too, but I don't think I've ever heard that on this show.
Probably not. Also not the easiest name. That your last name for me is easier to pronounce than Corticrax. Like that the lots of hard syllables are very hard for me to do. Confidently anyway. So we're talking about this article on the morningadvisor.co.uk about, it was an interview with Sean Hill from James Beeson, and really kind of a cool thing. We talked a lot about, the dangers of alcohol, I guess, essentially, in an alcohol-driven industry. Not driven is true, but it's kind of oddly an understatement.
Entirely alcohol.
Yeah. But there was a lot of other really good, interesting parts to it as well. And I think we talked so much about the alcohol part that we kind of lost some of the other stuff. We would normally move on to another topic. But I think it kind of does maybe a disservice to the article because it wasn't the entire article.
No.
You know?
So it was the entire headline.
It was the entire headline.
Clickbait.
But you got to get those clicks.
Get damn clicks.
You know, it's all about clicks now. Or really, it's about Insta followers. You know, you got to be an influencer. It's all about being an influencer at this point.
That actually is in the article, isn't it?
I think it is probably.
No, I don't think he used influencer.
But it's ridiculous. I was at a very quick. Well, we'll use this as a segue into what I think you're going to talk about, Mike, because you're going to set up the next point. But I was at a restaurant last week, and there was a big table of these people who were like pretty well dressed. We were there on a Tuesday night, my wife and I had a baseball cap on, and I actually took it off because it was like, oh, okay. And there were these people who were pretty well dressed, and there was all these like plates set out, and then there was a guy with a camera, and he was taking pictures, and then someone had this like tiny little about the size of a small paperback book portable light system that you could just kind of set anywhere, set on a tabletop. And I was like, well, what's going on? There was this big long table. I was like, are they taking pictures for a wedding of like a pre-party, or are they picking the menu? And it's this weird social media menu selection thing. And then, like, one of the managers of the restaurant also had a camera and was taking pictures. Like, something's going on here. And my wife, for a while, was saying, no, they're just having a fun time. It's like, these people are acting too larger than life to be comfortable with each other. You know, they're all being personalities right now. And I asked, eventually, one of the people, the manager with the camera, I was like, okay, what's going on? She's like, oh, this is an influencers dinner, and these are all people on Instagram with like food Instagram accounts with over 10,000 followers, and where we put on a dinner. And I thought, one, that's brilliant for this restaurant because it costs them essentially nothing, and two, I just was looking at these people and
judging.
And you know how when I'm judging someone, how do I judge? Positively? Is that how I am?
I really like these guys.
I skew negative, and generally, sadly, and it was I was pretty just shaking my head.
Pretty pro what they were doing.
Yeah,
huh?
pretty pro. I mean, it's interesting when I stopped actually paying attention after I saw someone trying to capture the look of like surprise and like flirty and yummy while also taking a selfie mid-bite of something and then looking at it and then recreating it again. And it's like, oh my gosh, you're here by yourself. All these people are not your friends. And you're putting out on the world what a wonderful time. It was so pornographic in a way. Like watching, like being on a porn set, I'm sure is like the most just like, but yeah. Like opposite of what they're trying to convey is kind of what my point is.
Right.
And that's exactly what it felt like to me. This is not spontaneous. This is not anything. And that's all what you're trying to do. And
Have you seen the beta version of that, like before social media? And it's like the bigger breweries would go to these establishments on busy weekend nights, walk in, order a gazillion of their bottled beer.
Yep.
And then they would all drink it with the
Yep.
label facing out, smiling and having a good time.
Guerrilla marketing.
I remember that.
Do you think the sales went up or more people ordered? I mean, that's just,
Well, the interesting thing is
Authentic.
these people are probably reaching more people who are more likely
Yep.
to act upon the image they're seeing than those like much more
Subtle.
established companies were doing, which is crazy to think about
Because
now.
it's it's totally true. That's why I said for the restaurant, it's I think a very savvy move. It costs them very little
Right.
to get a lot of promotion out there.
And it's very, very targeted. So for the longest time in
Yes.
advertising, the problem was how do we reach people that are actually going to end up buying this thing? And now with people who have curated their Instagram accounts like that, like one of our friends, Doug Valecki, is very much one of these people. I don't know if he gets any benefit from it, but he's tens of thousands of followers.
Might have helped
What's
them
his
get a
handle?
job,
Just kidding.
I'm not going to show for Doug. Doug's fine.
right?
Beer aficionado. But that you have a self-selected group of people who are telling you, I'm into beer, I'm into craft beer, I'm into like beautiful photography, I'm into like a quirky point of view. And so you can, if you know what you're going after, you can find exactly what that is, and at very little cost to you as the person who is bringing those content creators or influencers, whatever you're going to call them, into your realm. It's crazy. It's nuts.
It's crazy, and I think we're at a point. Well, we're drifting so far off.
Yeah,
this
to
topic.
bring
Let's
that back
get
to
to this topic. Let's just like do a hard stop on that because we can go on forever about that. That's not why people presumably are listening to this show. But there was a part of this article about.
It was about social media
Yeah.
in general, actually,
Yeah.
both in how it can influence the beers being, like why beers are created, how they're created, or how people perceive them, and then even further, how it affects people's everyday lives, and how he starts off talking about the New England style IPA and the Serge, can I say bastard?
Yes.
The bastardization of that style because of how visually unique it was at the time. And so he's like very, very directly equates the rise of Instagram to the rise of the New England style IPA.
Which is funny because Garrett Oliver from
Been saying that
Brooklyn
for a
said
long
the
time.
same thing a
They're
while
right.
back, and people were talking about him being an old man,
Well, we
not getting it.
Well, at our brewery, we perceived it with a specific brewery where it's like this brewery is ridiculous. Like their whole shtick is that they are ridiculous. What are you?
Nothing. No.
Oh, okay. The whole shtick is that they're ridiculous, and they're getting a lot of attention on Instagram. And they're making these hazy beers, and it's like I don't know how people are started off joking about it, and then they started off really wanting it, and then they eventually got to really, really wanting it, and how like that Shepherd Fairy idea of like, yes, this is from that brewery. The Shepherd Fairy idea of like it gains power simply because it is repeated so many times became totally true of that style, and people ended up liking it, and it hit part of like, I've seen this on Instagram, I should seek it out, that's what good beer is. And it also partially people are adverse to bitterness, and so that they were taking that out of it. But there were so many, frankly, bad versions of that style of beer because people were only trying to achieve a visual
And the brewery
metric.
that you are
Because they
mentioning,
were adding flour.
Well,
I don't know what
I mean,
I don't know what they were
whatever it
doing,
is.
but
we
had their beers, and they were objectively bad.
That was
beers.
the one that was, I think, maybe what turned me off on this style. I've said, so many times that people tell me, fans of the show tell me, shut up about it already. But I it's not my favorite. But one of I think the defining experiences with that style was when I'd had Hetty Topper. I'd had Hetty Topper, Steve, before most people in the country had had it, and I liked it.
You introduced me to it on our show in like 2011 or 12.
Yeah.
Hetty Topper's the only beer I've ever traded beer for.
Right.
I traded Zombie Dust for it,
And
actually.
there you go. Let's be real though. So I like that beer. I think Focal Banger is wonderful. I had Julius from Treehouse so long ago that like Treehouse wasn't even like a thing. I didn't really know anything
The house was on the
really
ground
Is this
about
becoming
them.
Chris was into cool things before
No,
they were
it
cool?
wasn't that, and I really liked it. What I'm trying to say is, but then I had, then they became this thing, and then the Midwest is doing it, and then this brewery was doing it, and I got one, and I had it, and it was. What do you do when something is garbage, but everyone is telling you that it's amazing, and that like the Midwest is here,
you
man?
have to be like the little boy who told the emperor he had no clothes, but then if everyone else is like, no, he's wearing clothes. You're like, what do you do?
You're like, well, all right, guys. I mean, he's still not wearing clothes.
this
But do whatever you want.
This isn't a phenomenon that's unique to beer, though. This is like happens in everything where there's a scarcity and there's desire for it. Like bootleg things are totally normal throughout the world of producing and selling things.
They are, but it's not. But it's always bootleg things. As far as I think, is that they are trying to approximate the real thing, and that the wearer would rather have the real thing. But now,
But the wearer,
it's people
the wearer
want the
can't
bootleg.
they can't get the real thing. And so if all they have is the bootleg and the bootleg was good enough, then how are they? When did they stop knowing the difference?
But now, Treehouse or Hetty or
Are
whatever
still
is
hard to get for everyone in the Midwest.
easier than some of this other stuff that's bootleg.
For,
At times,
you're talking about trading and everything like that,
I
I
don't
guess.
know.
But
anyway,
yeah, but the point, Sean, what Sean Hill was saying is that like Alchemist has been making beer that looked like that or somewhat like that, slightly like
Visually.
that for years.
Well, they
And
told
then
you
because
to
of
drink
ma-
it from the can. It was very explicit. It still is. Drink from the can.
Right, but because of people brought that to a somewhat logical extreme, and even some ones that aren't using flour or doing something that the weeds as the arbiters of what people should and shouldn't be adding to beer deem not correct. They're overdoing his claim that they're overdoing the thing that made them beautiful in the first place. So they turn from juicy or fruity into like overripe melon and flabby. Which some are, but some are still.
and he said-
some still are very, very good. I
I-
don't want to be like a fully downer on the style as a whole.
some are great. But he said, and Americans, this being America, we want to do everything extreme, which I think you and I, Masty, probably on the air multiple times have talked about. I do think so. If a little hazy is, people in this country are crazy. If a little hazy is good, or I take it back, if this beer is good and it's a little hazy, it must be because of the haze. Therefore, more haze is more good,
But
it worked.
But do we remember when people would send beers back because they were hasty?
Not anymore.
They used to.
But
Still do
so-
because
so-
I'm.
But that's an excellent point. Speaking to this Instagram culture of why did it become acceptable that things would be hazy? It can't be because these things are delicious. Because those beers that were probably a little hazy were also probably delicious.
Well, and
because they're-
Hefeweizens are a little hazy. They've been for a long time.
Yeah, no, totally. But it's because people have visually seen it over and over and over again to a point that they're like, okay, that's acceptable. And it's like the same thing as hearing a song on the radio over and over again that initially you're like, that's a terrible song. But and eventually you end up in Studio B
Humming
wearing
along.
a Taylor Swift shirt as a man, as
Which
a
I'm
grown
going to
man.
see tomorrow night.
Right. I'm not saying Taylor Swift is terrible. This is a funny joke to make. But like it's repeated observance of
And
things
Carrie's
that are
not the one
accepted.
wearing the shirt, by the way.
Yeah, it's Steve.
Maybe.
Steve Masti
Watch
is
out.
wearing
Carrie technically is not a grown man.
Steve, I mean this.
Maybe.
I mean this with no disrespect. I am shocked that they make Taylor Swift shirts that fit you. You're not. You're just.
We're an unmarketed to demographic.
right.
Totally.
I'm sorry. That was a tangent, but seeing these things over and over and over again give them power and give them acceptance, and that would only be possible because there is a medium that is 100% visual. I'm not sure if it's good or bad, but it's an incredibly new and incredibly interesting,
Incredibly
Powerful.
very powerful thing happening to not just beer, all
Everything.
products like that.
I said to somebody today, it's like, so is everything sold only on Instagram now? Because that's what it seems like to me.
I mean, it's the place that gets the most traction. There's, at least right now, it's probably the best confluence of ability to articulate a message and not getting drowned. No, you didn't listen to the other part. Not getting drowned out by the noise of everything else going on at you.
I feel that there's so much noise there.
But compare it to Twitter or Facebook.
I'll tell you,
to reach new people, you can't reach new people with your email list, which is the best place to actually tell people specifically what's going on. So it's by far the best interaction of those two things.
We're getting. I mean, this is getting way off topic, but I think Facebook is still ideally a better way to get people to find out about something and get
What
info
people?
about it.
It depends on
But
who and the
everyone, so
demographic.
the young people are saying no, but it's a better way ideally. But the thing is with Instagram, it's tap 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 tap. So they're so
Right.
much more likely to see something. That's that. Yeah,
Of course. Yeah. And
Just like pop,
and
pop,
it's follow,
pop, pop,
follow
pop,
like,
pop,
oh,
pop,
that
pop.
looks cool, follow, and now you're in their feed. And now, Facebook is a much more involved and much more specific, I think, medium for people to engage with than Instagram. It's like, oh, that's pretty, pop, follow. I'm no
But then
I'm no
how is it
expert.
not cluttered then? That to me seems so. I think Instagram does get. You're right.
I mean,
right.
but compare it to Twitter, where
No,
things on
Twitter-
Twitter are up and gone in 10 minutes.
I kind of prefer. I used to prefer Twitter, but I'm
I can't even
I can't do
parse
it
it.
anymore.
It's too
I can't
hard.
do it.
Yeah.
It's for bloggers and writers to have arguments now. It's a shame.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think
yeah, back when Twitter used to be what it was.
Trust me, I was on Twitter before anybody was. I was drinking Treehouse and Hill Farmstead with the owner of The Alchemist.
So what was the point that Mr. Hill was
I don't
making
know.
in this article? Essentially, it was that the use of social media can advocate agendas that you may not agree with. And, Randy Mosher says we drink with our eyes, and we do, but what do our eyes want? What our eyes have classically wanted, to Carrie's point, was clarity. We want something that's crystal clear and beautiful and also tastes good. But aesthetically, clarity is not necessarily inherently better than turbidity. I think I could make an argument, and I have before, about why maybe it is, but ultimately it's subjective. It's like, what is pretty, what is attractive, and if something tastes really nice and you can't quite achieve that taste with a classic clarity model, and you want to go with okay, well, we're going to have this thing that is very turbid and cloudy instead. If you've got this vehicle that you can get people to all agree this is okay, then all you've really done is changed the style. These are fundamentally aesthetic choices which don't have.
I agree with you. In several ways. I think that saying that something needs to be clear to be good is probably not going to result in always getting the best beer. I think there are beers that are amazing, and the better ones tend to be clearer. I also think that in a way, old school Instagram culture, aka people's eyes, led to the love of these clear beers, because clarity in beers became, and this brilliant quality in beers came about when glass mugs came about. So I've read and so I've heard. Pilsner really was the first beer that was talked about in its visual striking clarity and just its visual brilliance. And they were saying that it was about the same time that beer is being served into glass so people could see that it wasn't dark and muddy and murky.
Well, it's also interesting to think about, like, glass was technology then. Like, glass
Yeah.
was a forefront technology then to use as a drinking vessel. So it's like,
Yeah.
that's actually a really, really good analogy to be making. But it also, when you really think about what craft beer build itself as, and it still builds itself as the opposite of macro beer. What about that wouldn't lead to something being so opaque that it starts going around the horseshoe to ridiculous? It happened with bitterness for sure, where beers there. Like, remember 10 years ago we would have been having a conversation about like how these people, like, they're not using bitterness right. It's just bitter for bitter's sake. Beer's not supposed to be this bitter. It's like it's the same idea, just with a different aspect of how you create these things. So, yeah, I mean, and we've talked about like that it used to be this way, but it's different now. The life cycle of like a beer, someone getting into craft beer, where immediately they like this when we were talking about this 2 whole years ago, 3 whole years ago,
and then again
they would,
every time you're on probably. Just saying.
When I was still working at West Lakeview Liquors and Benny's, I would observe people go through this life cycle. It was short. It was like it happened within months, but they would go as bitter and as hoppy as possible if they got into craft beer at all, as quickly as possible to the most extreme thing. So people who are like getting into beer now are going as extreme for whatever the thing now is, and there's nothing wrong with that. But
which is exactly what Sean was saying. Americans being Americans, they want to push things extremely. But I cut you off.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but there are like, and some people won't like move past those things, and that's fine. But I think that there are different, better styles of beer. Like I don't know
And
where
I
I'm
would
going with
say-
this. To be honest, save me, please.
I would say that not all people getting into beer are going for that profile,
Right.
because there are a lot of underrepresented women that tend to like dark beers.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're really marketing to them at all.
If
or
anything,
fulfilling that need.
with gender, the one thing I might have noticed is because there's a lot of stereotypes about women like fruit beers and women like this. I think women don't like bitterness as much as men.
That's my point.
And I think that's why you see it in dark beers, you see it in fruit beers, and you're seeing it with these IPAs. So there are women ordering more IPAs now and buying more
Juicy.
IPAs now. These juicy haze bombs.
Fresh squeezed IPA.
Fresh squeezed bro bombs.
Shameless plug.
Fresh squeezed
That-
bro bomb.
than ever before. So I think that is actually a good thing. I don't think having sweeter IPAs that are juicy and tropical, I don't think any of these things are a bad thing at all. I just don't prefer them because I like more bitter IPAs. But then again, I also think there is a little bit of old man Chris here in Sean Hill's
man
words.
Chris.
Exactly. In that, this is how stuff just is being sold, and people are taking advantage of, people want it hazy, but now it's juicy and hazy. So it's now get it as bright and opaque as possible. So it has, because it used to be this like murky, weird, like dull,
Kind of brown.
gray brown color, but now it's about getting it bright. If you can get it bright yellow, that's amazing.
Shows
Bright
it better on
orange is also
Instagram.
good too.
Depends on how
But
you light
even
it.
like,
That's just
think of
kidding.
like other Instagram. It's not just IPAs. What about these Florida Vices? What about these like super
Totally.
fruited Berliner Weisses that have like radical colors that are pink and purple? And now I've just started noticing on Instagram green beers, and I was like, I saw it once,
St. Patrick's
and now I've
Day.
seen it like 2 and 3 times and
Budweiser's
4
been making
times.
that forever.
Bright green beers, opaque. So it's just a visual thing, selling beer visually, because we're And now I hadn't thought about till now, but it's probably an Instagram thing.
I think it probably is. Well, it's definitely, even if you're not going to say it's an Instagram thing, it's the ability to have a camera in your pocket and to get directly to people who are going to buy it in whatever medium you're using. So Instagram, Facebook, like the direct connection to the people who are potentially going to buy your beer and your ability to photograph it is unprecedented. So that, I mean, whether or not it's specifically Instagram is up for debate. It probably is because that's the most visual of those mediums. But it's a whole new paradigm of how
To have
what
visual represent, just to sell things with a visual, mostly unrepresented, and very quick bite approach, because it's not here's a picture and then here's a description of what it is, which is why I said Facebook, because like that can give you the whole story, but you're
can
never
write
going
as
to
much
get
on
someone to
Instagram.
stop.
Well, I think that the bigger thing becomes the driving decision behind why you're making something. So, like baked into the heady topper was that they made it look like that because it made it taste better, and they were pursuing aroma and flavor. And there was a spandrel of the fact that it was hazy. When you reverse engineer that and say we're going to try to make it look hazy, and then we're going to also kind of create the thing they were doing, that seems to be a less, I don't know what the right word is, virtuous way to go about creating an artisanal product.
Totally. Which
it seems like you're just a small company behaving like a large, behaving like a large company, which if you want to start getting into things that just taste like juice, craft beer is going to lose. Like, if you just want to, like, if things want to, like, big beer is going to destroy us. Like, if it turns into, like, what craft beer is.
Or big orange juice.
Big orange juice.
Right, big spirits, big Rita.
But if you want to make it taste like something fake, like, they're better at it than us, and they're more efficient at it than us, and they're better at getting it out to people than us. So I think that's the bigger worry. I know it's not that much of a worry, but it's a bigger worry of these things becoming the only thing that craft beer is known for.
Wine coolers. I mean,
Right.
Wine coolers.
Right.
They taste like juice. They taste so fruity and so juicy.
Yeah.
I mean, Bartles and James, man. I mean,
Right.
they're super.
Oh
yeah.
my.
Whoa.
There you go.
Shady.
So
What is that?
this is a North Coast Brewing Company Berliner Weiss tart cherry beer in a clear bottle with like kind of a white label. It's actually quite good. I mean, it genuinely
good.
is.
I've had it. Yep.
But I mean, they're very clearly going after the wine cooler market with this product, which is just an interesting play, for a elder statesman craft brewery.
It's also
I agree.
that
Independent
reminds
since
me-
1988. It says right on
that's
the
88.
it says right on the label.
Also, that reminds me of not that they're in any way similar, but like what we're talking about, like the Paletas that Five Rabbit made was
They moved away from bottles. I thought that was
it
not
was in
a good
clear
idea.
bottles.
Oh,
and
yeah.
it was
Brilliant.
cool, and it drew people to it, and it tasted like the point was to taste like ice cream
Popsicle, yeah.
popsicles, and it did, and it was delicious.
And those were cloudy. This is very clear
Yeah.
and looks more like a wine cooler.
Those
The
got
Paletas were
chill
cloudy.
haze, actually. When they were cold, they got cloudy. When they were
Weird.
warm,
On the shelf, they were clear.
I would
they
love
were
to see.
clear and
Really?
they get cloudy.
I
yeah.
know there's no IRI data for that, but it would be amazing to see if that was held on a shelf at a warm temperature versus cold, and what
Right.
the sales numbers.
So
would be in that.
with
Just an
Instagram
aside,
culture now,
sorry.
would that say that someone could maybe make a play at beautiful graphic cans drank directly from the can, and have that be
I
the
think
thing?
that's happening, right? Well, I don't think it actually needs to happen anymore. People are making beautiful graphic cans for sure.
We just launched Fresh Squeeze IPA in cans. Just
another
saying.
beautiful graphic can. But I think
So
this is by far the best
blatant.
time for can art or label art ever. It's amazing. Like so many breweries doing so many cool things with what's going on there.
I haven't seen as
the
many
outside.
bears on labels as I'd like, but otherwise I agree with you.
That's a great point.
What about Braupock?
This is a sexy
Came
can.
out.
You're holding up Charlatan by Maplewood.
I think this is a beautiful can.
It is. It doesn't have a bear, though.
It does not have a bear.
But people no longer have to just drink them out of cans, though. They can put them in their Teku glasses that have the same imagery on it, and then breweries get to make another
So we're
14
meandering.
hours
we could
out
have
of it.
we could
Sorry.
have a whole
I think we
conversation
should-
about glassware.
We could. We're not going to, but we could. you know what? I don't know if we've given that article a fairly short article, but you guys go read it. There's a whole backlash as
It'll
well.
take much less time than listening to this did.
Yeah.
Too late. You already listened to it.
The backlash, I think probably will just get lost on this show, but quite a backlash. But there are letters. I think we have time for a letter.
Yeah, we got time for that.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Mike. So, did you write this? Because Mike wrote.
Mike wrote to Mike.
I knew I was going to be
If you
on
want
it.
to write,
Instagram.
you should
This is an
pull out a
Instagram
piece of
DM.
paper,
Story.
get a pen or a pencil, or whatever, crayon, typewriter, and write it out, and then send it to the Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable at the Co-Prosperity Sphere. That's 3219 South Morgan Street, Chicago, Illinois, 60608.
Chris, may I make a proposal?
Yeah.
That you start accepting Instagram photos of handwritten letters as letters for the show,
Done.
or DMs.
Done. Or DMs. I don't like DMs. But
Instagram photos
What I
of
will
your
also do is
handwritten letter, please.
Instagram of a handwritten letter. I'll Instaham definitely.
What
that
should they
stuff.
hashtag it?
Strong Mike letter.
Yeah, Mike Strong letter. I'll have to now
Or
look for
maybe
that.
Beer Temple Insiders Roundtable.
Yes, that would probably
That would be
work
way
better.
too much to type.
And tag me in it.
I see
at
why you
least at
find
first.
see why you find Instagram not that
Yeah, like,
clean.
Or you could send it, or insiders at craftbeertemple.com. You can send me a photo of your letter that way, or just type it out, transcribe it. So write the letter, then transcribe it onto your computer, and then send it to me.
Take a picture of your
electronically.
monitor.
Yeah,
And
at
then
insiders.
get it developed at Kodak
So
and
all right,
send-
2 more minutes burned. Okay, so Mike writes, possibly strong Mike.
Eloquently.
Hey, Chris. I was listening to episode 123 when the group was arguing over saisons. We never argue, by the way, so there's no way that's true. Although I agree that Spotted Cow is not a saison. So we were talking about that Spotted Cow is marked as a farmhouse ale, but there's no way it's a saison.
Well, they
On
never
top of
call
the
it
big-
saison.
They call it a farmhouse.
Right.
Not really.
And
then
it's-
we-
no, but on sites there are beer
let's
sites.
finish the letter and then we
Like
can
beer,
then we'll,
beer advocate that call it a saison as
Okay.
a result. So, although I agree that Spotted Cow is not a saison / farmhouse, I guess I'm not sure why. It's frustrating because putting quote saison or quote farmhouse on a label doesn't give me an idea of what the beer actually is. So what helps inarguably define Saison DuPont or Fantôme as a saison versus its American imposters? FYI, on Beer Advocate, Spotted Cow is a cream ale, but on Untapped, it's a saison / farmhouse ale.
Yeast character.
There you go. So first of all, Beer Advocate is right. Untapped is wrong. Which I think is what we talked about in 1, 2, 3.
I mean, this is saison / farmhouse ale, which in and of itself is a problem, but is a perfect example of why style fails sometimes, because it's essentially a catch-all for beers made, starting with beers made in like France and Belgium that were outside of some normal Trappist or lager type tradition, and they are so varied and unique unto whatever farmhouse they were in. They started being brewed by farmers for their farm hands, and they was just whatever they had. So it really, there is not a great. Well, we do have a BJCP or whatever those letters are. Judge here who might be able 2, 3, 4, 5. Serge, they might be able to like define what it is in those terms, but it is just a catch-all term. So I think Steve is right that it is a saison or is a yeast-driven character. After that, it just goes. You can go any which way with it. Specifically, probably a more phenolic yeast character, but
Yeah, it's a specific yeast character, I think.
Right.
I think that there's... Yeah, sorry.
But think about things like Saison DuPont versus like Tank 7 versus like a bunch of other things that are technically all called saisons, but some are none of those are brewed on farmhouses. And
Right.
I would say that it's fair to say that all saisons are farmhouse ales, but not all farmhouse ales are saisons.
I don't know if
in a sense,
I think that's a good
for the layman's
Yeah.
terms.
good broad.
I kind of
framework.
use them
But
as
what
the
it-
exactly the same thing personally, because saison I think is so broad. But I think that it can't just be yeast driven. It has to be a specific
Sure it
yeast
can.
character. It can't simply be yeast driven. Like it's a yeast driven beer, so it's a saison.
Well, all beers are yeast driven in that they're fermented by yeast, but some taste
but the
like
flavor
yeast.
the flavor profile has to come
Right.
from
Right,
the,
like I mean,
the
you've
process
got
of
you got malt, you got hops, you got water, and you've got yeast.
No. What I'm saying,
And if the
Steve, I
yeast
think
is
is
driving the
supporting.
train-
Right. Exactly. That's.
But-
you and I are agreeing. So
That-
you can't. That's not enough. You can't just say it's yeast.
right. Then you
driven.
fall into the cracks again of like not all
Hefeweizen.
yeast driven beers are saison
Right.
or
That's
farmhouse.
kind of what
But-
I'm saying.
But also on Nuclearis's website, it says an unfiltered farmhouse ale. 1 and 2, we have to keep in mind that not only are there brewers behind the beers that are created, but there are also marketing folks.
Sure.
And so there's a lot of words that are put on things that don't necessarily describe
Yep.
what is in the bottle.
Oh, I mean, yeah.
What is Wisconsin? It's the dairy state, right? A lot of farms,
Among other
farmhouses. They
Badger
identify
states.
with that.
Farm hands,
Farm hands. They are
farmhouse.
They are. There's fresh farms, fresh squeezed farms.
So saison is a French word that literally means season.
Season.
Right?
Yeah.
So I mean,
Well,
you could-
but I think the issue, and I know where we're going with that. Yeah, it means season, but I do think marketing is a great.
Go back to IRI data, Nielsen data. People see certain things ticking up, and then they start using those words: sour, session,
Especially when they're not like specifically defined.
Hazy, juicy.
hazy, juicy, New
Yep.
England. Da, da, da.
And the funny thing is when you see those numbers ticking up, and then you see the bigger, clumsier breweries literally just like
Responding.
splattering those terms on their, like, I'm hazy, juicy, sour, tropical, canned, haze bomb, bro, sticker label beer.
To see a big brewery put Haze Bomb Bro on a label.
It'd be amazing.
So
I'd sue them.
there's a brewery that I knew that used a very specific wording on one of their main flagships, and a bigger brewery, a bigger national brewery, used that same terminology on a new product they were launching, and the smaller national craft brewery was like, they can't do that. That's our words.
But it happens.
These are
But
descriptors.
they called said institution and said, hey, we have a brewer who works there, and said, is it possible that you not use those words? And they said, okay, we're not going to use those words.
Whoa, that's cool.
That's
So that's
cool.
a big,
That's a good way
big
to handle
deal.
that.
I just know some
Because
people
that doesn't
that happened to.
No, this is a side note, but that doesn't even happen amongst small breweries anymore.
I know. It's
So,
really super cool.
We were making a beer with a word in the title that is a descriptive word that another brewery technically has the trademark on. Talked to our lawyer, like, yeah, it's probably too broad if you guys want to fight it.
Dust.
Yeah, dust. It's a descriptor. But so at our pop-up bar on the first night, someone from this other brewery comes up to us and says, "Are you making this?" Didn't introduce themselves as that immediately. Like, "Are you making this beer?" Like, "Yeah, it's gonna be great." They're like, "Well, I work for XYZ Brewery, and we're gonna sue you."
Oh, wow.
And we're like, "You're gonna sue us?" I feel like you're skipping many steps in this process, and
like
also
a
this
conversation.
it's like, yeah. Ultimately, this conversation led to us being like, well, we don't want to like get sued by this company, so we're not going to use that word, and we can find other words to use. But it was like that never happened, and we've had that like happen to us a couple of times with people. Like, we're like, all right, we can get rid of that one. Like, I don't. You could have just called us, and we've been like, fine. But
Well,
it's just,
I'd like to talk about it more on air, but we'll have to talk about it more off air because we have come to that time. I wanted to thank my guests for being on, Steve, Carrie, and Mike. That's how I did that. Quarter cracks.
Thank you.
There you go.
nice.
And I want to thank all you guys for listening. If there's any final words that you guys would like to say, now would be the time. Anyone? Mike? No? Carrie or Steve?
I'm just thankful to be
Ooh,
in.
she jumped on it.
I'm just thankful to be in this industry with so many great, creative, amazing people, and it's a joy. So
Well, thanks for coming on. It's been a while. We've been trying to get you on for a while.
I know. Thank you.
Cool, guys.
I think Steve has something
Oh,
to say.
Steve.
No, not so much.
Okay.
Cheers to everyone out there. Be here, go have a beer, and cheers.
Awesome.
Cheers.
All right, guys. Until next time, we will, I don't know. We don't have a sign off, so just play music, Serge. See you later.
Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again, 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 again. Remember this is what we wanted. Remember this is what we said. To never be heard or seen from again, 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 again.